Episode 172. The moment they made contact with his skin, the tentacles began wrapping themselves around Ron's arms like ropes.
Harry, look what's happened. No, I don't like it. No, stop.
But the thin ribbons were spinning around Ron's chest now. He tugged and tore at them as the brain was pulled tight against him like an octopus's body. "Defendo!" yelled Harry, trying to sever the feelers wrapping themselves tightly around Ron before his eyes, but they would not break. Ron fell over, still thrashing against his bonds. "Harry, it'll suffocate him," screamed Ginny, immobilized by her broken ankle on the floor. Then a jet of red light flew from one of the Death Eater's wands and hit her squarely in the face. She kneeled over sideways and lay there, unconscious. "Stupefy!" shouted Neville, wheeling around and waving Hermione's wand at the oncoming Death Eaters. "Stupefy! Stupefy!" But nothing happened. One of the Death Eaters shot their own stunning spell at Neville. It missed him by inches. Harry and Neville were now the only two left fighting the 5 Death Eaters, 2 of whom sent streams of silver light like arrows past them that left craters in the wall behind them. Harry ran for it as Bellatrix Lestrange sprinted right at him. Holding the prophecy high above his head, he sprinted back up the room. All he could think of doing was to draw the Death Eaters away from the others. It seemed to have worked. They streaked after him, knocking chairs and tables flying, but not daring to bewitch him in case they heard the prophecy. And he dashed through the only door still open, the one through which the Death Eaters themselves had come, inwardly praying that Neville would stay with Ron, find some way of releasing him. He ran a few feet into the new room and felt the floor vanish. He was falling down steep stone step after steep stone step, bouncing on every tier until at last, with a crash that knocked all the breath out of his body, he landed flat on his back in the sunken pit where the stone archway stood on its dais. The whole room was ringing with the Death Eaters' laughter. He looked up and saw the 5 who had been in the brain room descending toward him, while as many more emerged through other doorways and began leaping from bench to bench toward him. Harry got to his feet, though his legs were trembling so badly they barely supported him. The prophecy was still miraculously unbroken in his left hand. His wand clutched tightly in his right. He backed away, looking around, trying to keep all the Death Eaters within his sights. The back of his legs hit something solid. He had reached the dais where the archway stood, and he climbed backward onto it. The Death Eaters all halted, gazing at him. Some were panting as hard as he was. One was bleeding badly. Dolohov, freed of the full-body bind, was leering, his wand pointing straight at Harry's face. "But your race is run," drawled Lucius Malfoy, pulling off his mask. "Now hand me the prophecy like a good boy." Let the others go and I'll give it to you," said Harry desperately. A few of the Death Eaters laughed. "You are not in a position to bargain, Potter," said Lucius Malfoy, his pale face flushed with pleasure. "You see, there are 10 of us and only 1 of you. Or hasn't Dumbledore ever taught you how to count?" "He's done alone," shouted a voice from above them. "He's still got B." Harry's heart sank. Neville was scrambling down the stone benches toward them, Hermione's wand held fast in his trembling hand. "Neville, no! Go back to Ron!" "Stupefy!" Neville shouted again, pointing his wand at each Death Eater in turn. "Stupefy! One of the largest Death Eaters seized Neville from behind, pinioning his arms to his sides. He struggled and kicked. Several of the Death Eaters laughed. It's Longbottom, isn't it? Sneered Lucius Malfoy. Well, your grandmother is used to losing family members to our cause. Your death will not come as a great shock.
Longbottom,
repeated Bellatrix, and a truly evil smile lit her gaunt face.
Why, I have had the pleasure of meeting your parents, boy.
I know you have, roared Neville, and he fought so hard against his captor's encircling grip that the Death Eater shouted, "Someone stun him!"
No, 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 said Bellatrix.
She looked transported, alive with excitement as she glanced at Harry, then back at Neville.
No, let's see how long Longbottom lasts before he cracks like his parents. Unless Potter wants to give us the prophecy.
Don't give it to them, roared Neville, who seemed beside himself, kicking and writhing as Bellatrix grew nearer to him, and his captor, her wand raised. Don't give it to them, Harry! Bellatrix raised her wand.
Crucio!
Neville screamed, his legs drawn up to his chest so that the Death Eater holding him was momentarily holding him off the ground. The Death Eater dropped him and he fell to the floor, twitching and screaming in agony.
That was just a taster,
said Bellatrix, raising her wand so that Neville's scream stopped, and he lay sobbing at her feet. She turned and gazed up at Harry.
Now, Potter, either give us the prophecy or watch your little friend die the hard way.
Harry did not have to think. There was no choice. The prophecy was hot with the heat from his clutching hand as he held it out. Malfoy jumped forward to take it. And then, high above them, 2 more doors burst open and 5 more people sprinted into the room. Sirius, Lupin, Moody, Tonks, and Kingsley. Malfoy turned and raised his wand, but Tonks had already sent a stunning spell right at him. Harry did not wait to see whether it had made contact, but dived off the dais out of the way. The Death Eaters were completely distracted by the appearance of the members of the Order, who were now raining spells down upon them as they jumped from step to step toward the sunken floor. Through the darting bodies, the flashes of light, Harry could see Neville crawling along. He dodged another jet of red light and flung himself flat on the ground to reach Neville. "Are you okay?" he yelled, as another spell soared inches over their heads. "Yes," said Neville, trying to pull himself up. "And Ron?"
"I think he's all right. He was still fighting the braid when I left."
The stone floor between them exploded as a spell hit it, leaving a crater right where Neville's hand had been seconds before. Both scrambled away from the spot. Then a thick arm came out of nowhere, seized Harry around the neck, and pulled him upright so that his toes were barely touching the floor.
"Give it to me," growled a voice in his ear. "Give me the prophecy."
The man was pressing so tightly on Harry's windpipe that he could not breathe. Through watering eyes, he saw Sirius dueling with a Death Eater some 10 feet away. Kingsley was fighting 2 at once. Tonks, still halfway up the tiered seats, was firing spells down at Bellatrix. Nobody seemed to realize that Harry was dying. He turned his wand backward toward the man's side, but had no breath to utter an incantation. And the man's free hand was groping toward the hand in which Harry was grasping the prophecy. Ah! Neville had come lunging out of nowhere. Unable to articulate a spell, he had jabbed Hermione's wand hard into the eye-hole of the Death Eater's mask. The man relinquished Harry at once with a howl of pain, and Harry whirled around to face him and gasped, "Stupefy!" The Death Eater keeled over backwards, and his mask slipped off. It was McNair, Buckbeak's would-be killer, one of his eyes now swollen and bloodshot. "Thanks," Harry said to Neville, pulling him aside as Sirius and his Death Eaters lurched past, dueling so fiercely that their wands were blurs.